When the war ended in Europe, celebration filled the streets of Allied capitals. Church bells rang. Flags were raised. Newspapers printed a single word in bold letters: victory. But behind barbed wire in Canada, victory felt different. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered unconditionally. Across Canada, nearly 34,000 German prisoners of war listened to the announcement in silence. The guards expected cheers. Some expected despair. Instead, many prisoners felt something else: fear. For years they had lived as captives, yet their lives had followed a strange rhythm of stability. Camps were orderly. Food was consistent. Work existed. Days passed with routine. The rules were strict but predictable. Now that structure was about to disappear. The Geneva Convention required repatriation. Prisoners would be sent home. Officially, this was freedom. But freedom meant returning to Germany, and Germany no longer existed as they remembered it. Letters arrived first. They came from wives, parents, siblings, sometimes from neighbors writing on behalf of the dead. The handwriting was shaky. The paper was poor quality. Many letters were delayed for months. Some never arrived at all. The content was always the same. Our city is gone. There is no work. Food is scarce. We sleep in cellars. The children are sick. Do not expect a home. Hamburg lay in ruins after relentless bombing. Dresden had burned in firestorms that killed tens of thousands in a single night. Berlin was divided into occupation zones, its infrastructure shattered. Railways were twisted steel. Factories were rubble. Farms lacked tools, seed, and labor. For prisoners who had spent years working Canadian soil, the contrast was impossible to ignore. In Canada, they harvested sugar beets. They logged forests. They repaired machinery. They earned wages modest but reliable. Money accumulated in camp accounts. Some had savings for the first time in their lives. They had learned English from guards and farmers. They followed Canadian news. They understood rationing, but also abundance compared to post-war Europe. Most importantly, they had experienced something unexpected: respect. They were prisoners, but not degraded. They were supervised, but not beaten. Punishment followed rules, not rage. Even when tensions arose, the system remained consistent. As repatriation approached, a quiet question spread through the camps. What if going home is worse than staying imprisoned? By late 1945, the question had become a decision. Across camps in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, German prisoners began discussing an idea that seemed impossible just months earlier. What if they stayed? Not illegally, not by escape, but by asking. The proposal was unprecedented. Prisoners drafted formal petitions requesting permission to remain in Canada after the war. They emphasized willingness to work. They cited labor shortages. They referenced relationships built with farmers and employers. They did not ask for citizenship. They asked for a chance. Nearly 6,000 prisoners signed these requests, almost 1 in 5 of all Germans held in Canada. Canadian officials were stunned. From a practical standpoint, the request made sense. Canada faced a severe labor crisis. Tens of thousands of Canadian men were still overseas or returning wounded. Agriculture, logging, and infrastructure desperately needed workers. Farmers wrote letters supporting the prisoners. Many argued openly that German workers were more reliable than any labor force they had known during the war years. Local newspapers debated the issue. Some editorials supported allowing prisoners to stay under supervision. Others warned of security risks, political backlash, and moral implications. Could former enemy soldiers become neighbors? Public opinion split, but the decision did not belong to Canada alone. Britain intervened. As the senior Allied authority, Britain insisted on strict adherence to international law. The Geneva Convention of 1929 was clear: prisoners of war must be repatriated once hostilities end. No exceptions. Humanitarian treatment during captivity did not grant immigration rights afterward. Canadian officials argued quietly. They proposed transitional work programs. They suggested limited permits. Britain refused every option. The war had ended. The legal obligation was absolute. And so, despite sympathy, despite logic, despite economic need here, the answer was no. Between 1945 and December 1946, trains once again crossed the Canadian landscape, this time carrying prisoners eastward to ports, then across the Atlantic. Men who had spent years building lives in Canada were sent back to a country of ruins. Many wept openly, not because they were leaving prison, but because they were leaving home. Repatriation did not erase memory. Germany in 1946 was chaos. Food shortages bordered on famine. Black markets replaced formal economies. Housing barely existed. Occupation authorities controlled movement, employment, and speech. Former prisoners returned not as heroes, but as burdens, yet they carried something others did not: skills, savings, and an idea of a country that had treated them differently. Canada had followed the law without cruelty. It had shown restraint without weakness. Guards had enforced rules without hatred. Farmers had trusted enemies with tools, vehicles, even weapons, and been rewarded with honesty. That memory endured. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, Canada reopened immigration channels. Labor was still needed. The country was expanding westward. Farms, factories, and towns required workers. Thousands of former prisoners applied again. This time, they came legally. Canada approved many of them. They returned not behind barbed wire, but through immigration offices. Some went back to the very farms they had once worked under guard. Others settled in cities, using trades learned during captivity. They built houses, opened workshops, started businesses, married, raised children. They became Canadians. Some bought land they had once harvested as prisoners. Others sponsored relatives from Europe. Quietly, without ceremony, they integrated into the country that had once imprisoned them. Today, their descendants live across Canada, unaware in many cases of the full story. The camps are gone, the guard towers dismantled, the records archived, but the outcome remains. Canada proved that adherence to law, even toward enemies, creates something rare in history: loyalty. Not loyalty forced by fear, but loyalty earned through dignity. Wars are remembered for battles and victories. This story is remembered for restraint. And for the moment when thousands of former enemies, given a choice between a broken homeland and a country that treated them as human beings, chose Canada.